Welcome, everybody, to the Cadre Concept. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with your host, Shane McGraw. Shane, how are you today?
I am doing well.
Good, man. I love it. I love your vibe. I just got to say, like, we've had conversations before this official show. This is like episode 1 of your show, but I'm really looking forward to our conversations about business, first of all, because I love that topic, but moreover, you're just a good dude, and I'm excited to hear all the things that life has taught you about the Cadre Concept and how you got here. So let's use episode 1 for that, man. I want to hear the way back. Like, give me the way back so we know how we got here and what this whole show is going to be about.
I actually love that you asked that. So here's kind of what I think. I think in order to, I have a lot to say about today, but I think that in order for you to have the construct of understanding kind of why I'm where I'm at and where I'm coming from is you got to understand where I came from. We all have a story. And I think the biggest mistake we make is that we don't take time to learn other people's stories. And if we did, there's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's one of my favorites. And he talks about if you earnestly seek out to understand the other person's side of the, what's going on, what you'll find is if you grew up like they did, if you had the father they had, if you had the environment they had, if you grew up in the deep South where, not everybody was created equal and, you too might have this too. So you should probably have some grace for the other. And I think that is kind of a synopsis of where we're going to go with the Cadre Concept and my passion and dream and what I hope that will catch fire as a movement. But in order for that to happen, I think you have to understand a little bit about how I came to understand the value of the Cadre Concept and how this is coming from me. It's not something I sat down and said, I want to sell something or I got to make something up. This is what I've come through. I've arrived at.
I just want to set a little context for people coming into this they don't know you, right? They're coming in, they're like, this sounds interesting, the Cadre Concept, and there's enough text description of like what the show is about. But I mean, let me just pair it back to you what I feel like you've said to me in the past, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's do it.
Or add to it, and then we can go way back. So, you and I both come from the business world. You've been I would say you've been a super successful businessman. And our heart is for business people to not just make a lot of money, but to actually start to do work that feels rewarding, that feels like it comes from their soul, like a place that it's not just about money and the chase. And I feel like a lot of business advice gets into like the hustle, the grind, the chase. And that at the end of the day, that's bankrupt. That doesn't lead to a fulfilling life. And the whole reason we get into business is for fulfilling life. So am I close at all to the heart of like where we want to go in the show?
Sure. I mean, I think if you look at it like an onion, that's the top layer. So that's like the beginning of understanding. And then it gets deeper from there. You got to understand your why and there's a lot of stuff that comes to it, but yeah, for sure. And I think we learned that until we do a lot of the right things, but holistically we're going the wrong direction and we can feel the pain. And then at some point we have a breaking point and then you're either going to get it or you're going to keep repeating the cycle. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us repeat the cycle. And when I tell you my story, you're going to see what I did to break the cycle. And I hope that it inspires you to think to yourself like, okay, so there is life on the other side of a big decision. You know, and then of course I'm still living that out and we'll find out if I made the right decision or not at some point.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about who I am so that you can kind of get some perspective. And, I'm about ready to kind of share, what I hope to do is put out this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not starting it to be the next Joe Rogan. Although Joe Rogan's probably a good analogy because he's basically hanging out with all of his friends, doing stuff he loves to do, talking about things he loves to talk about. Yeah. And people want to tune into that because there's lots of people like Joe Rogan that are into the same thing he is. And I'm hoping that you'll be the same way when you're listening to my podcast. But where I started was kind of a tough space. And so I just wanted to preface people that I need you to understand my story a little bit, but it's who I was, but it's not who I am. But you need to know it because it's rightfully so. Yeah. So it's a little hard for me to tell you because it's painful. Yeah. But so I was as a little boy, and remember, most of your memories are memories of emotions, not necessarily what happened. So my details are probably not great, but I can tell you what I remember. I grew up in I was conceived at an early age by a little girl and a little boy that were not ready. And my dad had dropped out of high school. I believe it was in 7th grade. And he was a hustler and doing his thing and doing drugs. And he was the good looking guy that had an apartment when he was 15 or 16 or something, back in different times. So him and my mom's a beautiful soul. And so I hope I don't paint her in any negative light, but she has her story too and her journey. Right. But so she had 3 kids and she lost one in the process. So she had four total, but she had 3 kids by the time she was 21. And
Wow.
she was a kid raising kids, and she didn't know what she was doing. Well, my dad, he became a very good drug addict and a very good drug dealer. And that was first and foremost in his life. And so his family was second. And, he was very, very, I'm an emotional being, especially back when I was young. So I responded to a lot of what he did worse than my brothers and sisters. So a lot of it was how I felt. But he was very abusive, both verbally and physically. He was very, very physically abusive with my mother and verbally. And I was his beating post as the oldest and the emotional weak one. He took some time there. Well, it got so bad, and my dad's drug dealing got so high that he was importing drugs and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was a big deal. I think he was I was told that he was one of the largest drug dealers in all of Utah. And his nickname was South, because all southern Utah was his territory. I don't know that to be true, but I was pretty young. Anyway, so my mom kind of ran from my father to Washington State and married a new man named Dave, and we started a new life. And in the middle of that, she found Jesus and had this radical change. And like, that was my first introduction to what it looked like to maybe a higher power. But I didn't know anything of it. So anyways, fast forward, my stepdad, he was a kind man, but just very insecure and very hurt. And so he would do the whole, you will respect me in my home type of thing to broken kids. He came into a tough environment. Right. Long story short, I came to be 18, 19-year-old kid that was very angry, very broken, and very much wanted to break the trajectory that I was on. So I joined the military. All else fails, join the government where they tell you how to think and when you really struggle with that. So the next 5 years were crazy for me, and they taught me a ton about myself, but only until the last about 18 months, 2 years did I really get it. I went to the Middle East, and I had made a lot of mistakes between then. I mean, at the time that I was all whining and crying before I left, I literally just got again broken up with by a stripper. So like I had lost my compass, and went to the Middle East, found Jesus, recommitted myself to my health, recommitted myself to learning for the first time in my life. I never learned, like I never opened a book because I wanted to get something out of it. I just did it because I had to. And that led me to this new journey where, so my first phase of my life, and I think some of you guys are like this, where I was trying not to be my dad. And then when I went to become a man in the military, and I had that moment when I no longer could blame him for my actions. I had to take ownership on my own. And I had to, if I had anger problems, they were mine, not my dad's. And so that led me to a journey where I turned the corner from trying not to be my dad to trying being who I'm supposed to be. And then I did that for a while and did really well. I got out of the military, worked for the government, and my wife was really happy because, her dad worked for the government for 38 years. Long story short, I got there and I knew within weeks that like this 9-to-5 grind was just not how I was wired. And I was miserable. And I started counting, like looking at the mundane tasks, and the old timers kept saying stuff to me like, hey, you got 40 years, take it easy. The work will be here tomorrow. And I'm like, my brain I grew up with one thing for sure from my dad is that you identify by being a man by working hard. That's what he would tell me. And that's what I took away. Whether or not he was a hard worker or not, I don't know. But I thought for sure, my mom used to always tell me, Shane, I don't have to worry about you because, if you got down on your luck, you'd work at all 5 McDonald's in town if you had to. Wow. I used to always think, damn right I would. I'm going to push that more faster than anybody else. And so this next season of my life was like, I'm going to go push this stone up the hill, and I'm going to break every cycle, and I'm going to become successful. I'm going to make a new legacy. And I had this moment when I was, I don't think I've ever shared this with hardly anybody. So you guys are getting the raw Shane. I love it. I think I was 8, 9, 10, somewhere on there. And my dad was beating my mother, and my mother had gotten mad at me because if I got in the middle of that, he would beat me too. And so she made me agree that I would grab my brother and sister and I would go across the street of this, now it's a big highway thing, but it was kind of a road, and across the street was a fish hatchery, and there was a park bench, and I had to wait on the park bench. And I remember being, young enough to know better, but not old enough to understand, and seeing my dad do that to my mom in the shadows of the house across the street. And I just felt like a peace about myself that I was going to make a new legacy, that I wasn't going to let this be my story. So this second chapter, I had a lot of why, and a lot of, like goals. So I started going after it and before you know it, I started doing mortgages. I was a mortgage lender. I started doing mortgages at night when I wasn't at the shipyard, and going to work and getting all my buddies in the shipyard to do loans with me. And because I came out of the military, I was making more than everybody else. And I was selected to go the farthest because I already had so much experience and I already had all the certifications they were looking for. And I hated it. I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, they would be like, hey, you need to come in on Saturday and work. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm down with that. I'll work overtime. I'm not afraid of work, but we got to work. I just had a brand new baby boy. I was just married. I'm like, if I'm going to be here on a Saturday, I better be earning a paycheck. I'm not going to get paid to sit here. And they were like, what? That wasn't their culture. The culture was like, no, this is the good gravy time. You got to take it. And I'm just like, if I'm going to be there, I want to earn my paycheck. That's just the way I am.
Right.
I can't sit very still. If you get to know me, I need to be doing something. So long story short, I spent that time. I got the mortgage business going. And then I was lucky enough to experience the first downturn of the economy back in 2009. And so I'm like 15 months deep. I'm making like 10 grand a month, thinking I'm like on top of the world. Remember, I was in the military where I made like 3 grand a month with all my benefits and everything. So I thought I was the man. So I started spending accordingly. And before you know it, the market crashed and I couldn't make 10 grand a month doing anything else, not fast enough. So I ended up filing bankruptcy and kind of losing a lot of what I had built. And I had this moment when I genuinely felt like, I don't know if you're like me, but I was like, oh crap, I'm going to turn out like my father.
Wow.
Because I went back to that fear roots. Right. And I decided that one thing that my father didn't do, and this is the first lesson he gave me, he was my first teacher. We all have our first teacher. Yeah. And he taught me what not to do. That was his part in my story. And I remember that he would give up and when it got hard and he would turn to drugs and turn to self-indulgence. And so I just said, no, I'm not gonna do that. So I hunkered back down and I climbed my way out of it. But then I got this lesson. I was 30 years old, just filed bankruptcy, had 3 babies, 1 new, and I'm looking going, man, but I told myself, I'm going to make sure that the taxpayers helping me out, I'm not ever going to do this again. So at 30 years old, I got the gift of understanding finances. And so I went and hired a coach and they started teaching me. And for the last 6 years, I have been at the top of my game, at least as far as I'm concerned. I've built big teams and I've done lots of loans and I made $1 million in a year. I made 750 and then 850 and then 950, almost $1 million. And I just felt like I was the man. I had it all. I was savings really, really well. I was giving really well. But my soul, I just felt like I had gotten to the top of it. I had this vision of what it looked like to grow it. When I got up there and I realized, man, this isn't, you have to step on too many people and you have to, I got my phone glued to my face and when I'm around my kids and, I was always a good dad and a good husband and a good friend and a good this and a good that, but I was never a great. I was never great. And so I started taking inventory over the last year and I started realizing my talents were good at a lot of things. So I started buying companies and buying houses and commercial buildings and stuff. And I found I'm really good at making deals. And then I realized somewhere in there, I had this epiphany that being good at something matters not at all unless you can do it in harmony with others. And that's where my journey started, where I started realizing chapter 3. So chapter 1 was don't be your father. Chapter 2 was go be you. And chapter 3 is the me that I want to be, the legacy I want to build is the people business. I recognize that making money doesn't mean anything. I don't think that I was necessarily ever doing it the wrong way. I just wasn't doing it authentically. I was doing things with the underlying tone that I will help you and, I'm here to help, but I want to make something in return. I want money. So I was providing tons of value to people, but it was all with strings attached. Right. I found the first rule of the LPR cadre, the whole thing is that the cadre concept is you have to give without expecting something in return. And that's hard. Yeah. It's hard. Our economy says that, what's in it for me? That's why our marriage divorce rate is so high. That's why our kids are so quick to run because they're like, hey, there's no exchange anymore. Like you're done with me. So
awesome. Dude, that's good, man. That's so deep.
More about it, but yeah.
No, yeah. Well, and I think that's a perfect frame for what's happening in the show. Like, I mean, first, and also, this is what makes this type of show so rich is when you give the type of transparency you just gave. Like, I am looking forward to the show big time because I feel like this is what we all have, like thoughts that we think, and we're just afraid to share it out loud because we think we're the only one. We don't know that. It's just reassuring when we hear other people who have had their successes, but the successes are in light of the struggle. Like, how did you, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, it's perfect. I think I love this phrase of like calling life school. Like there's an opportunity in your 80 to 100 years on this planet to just learn. Like, this whole thing is a learning thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've kind of called it, and maybe this is something that you can look at, and I wrote a book, I won't plug it, but in the book I wrote a chapter that I got from my coaching thing, and it's called Drifting, Driven, and Directed. And I think my first season was I was very drifted. I didn't have a sense of purpose or why, and I was just kind of pleasing my flesh and just doing whatever felt good and you know, making the best of it. I didn't know, just like probably most of us young men. And then I became very driven, which means I was very clear about what I wanted, and I knew that it was on the other side of money and stuff and you know, a hot wife and that kind of thing. I became very clear that I needed those things. And then once I got into that phases, I realized that, man, if I'm going to do this right, it can't be about me. And so driven in its purest form is about you. When you're super driven, when someone says, man, you're so driven, what they're saying is you're dependable, you're a dog that can hunt, but it's because you're about you. And I used to hate that. It started to affect me. I started to go, man, it's a compliment, but I don't think it's a compliment to me. Like I don't feel complimented. So that's when this driven became a thing. That's where Jesus came back into my life and started shaping me, and I started humbling myself to that process. But I also started consuming tons of books and tons of resources and coaching. And like many of you, like most of my friends, you know, if you get in a room and you're like, hey, you know, what book you're reading, you know, everybody's got something to say. Oh man, I read this book. Have you heard this author? And they're all buying for, it's almost like the author is an extension of who they are, you know, and they're all trying to fill it up. So in the Cadre Concept, we realized that there's basically 5 F's, 7 F's is what we have. And those 7 F's kind of make up the sum of your life. And if you look at each one of them and say, you know, am I directed in these areas? Like, do I have a mission? And then am I highly skilled? Right. So do I have a mission? Am I highly skilled? And then can I connect with others to go on that mission together? That's the formula. What people do is they say, I'm highly skilled. I want to make money. So let's go connect with other people. But then they don't go on mission where they're actually, honoring the other person and trying to see the other person win. They're just only winning. They're only going on mission to gain or, you know, more to gain than to give. And everybody's heard it, givers gain, but people don't realize that it's actually the secret sauce. It just sounds like it's hocus pocus.
No, I love it. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap because we can talk after we end recording, but I definitely think that starting to frame the 7 F's and the different pieces of this Cadre concept is where a lot of this, the directive, not directed by Jesus or by God, but just the way that we can, what you've learned to direct perspective is kind of where we can start to go in the conversation. So, Shane, if people want to reach out to you, maybe they just were really touched by your story and they're like, dude, I am in that same space. And help me. How do I do that?
Happening already? This is so cool.
Oh yeah, already. Like where do people go?
I've literally asked myself, like, what if this works? What if people actually want to tune into the story? And you know, what would I say? Like, so what I would tell you guys is I'm just going to be myself, and I'm going to be messy and sloppy and do my best. But I'm going to keep putting it out there. So if you want to connect with me, and you know, I'll give you my cell phone number. I'll give you my email, and you can call me anytime you want. I think that's what this is all about, is community. So you can email me at support@lprgo.com. Okay. That's the best way to email me. And that comes to me and my group here. And then if you want to call me, you can call me on my personal cell, 360-620-7119. Wow. I had a friend do that, and I literally called him, and now he's my friend.
That's crazy. I love it. There you go. Living it out. All right. Good stuff, Shane. This was amazing. I can't wait for the next one. Thanks for your time today, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, man.